Thank you and welcome to Stepping Into Me, the podcast. I am yours truly, Latoya Dameron, and I am so excited to be with all of you today. On this podcast, we're going to unpack some topics and some subjects. They're intended to be thought-provoking. They're intended to be eye-opening, inspiring. The goal is for you to start your week engaging in conversation that encourages you to embrace who you are, embrace your purpose in life, and leave you with tangible ways to apply the content that you learn right here on this podcast. So we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you, if this is your first time tuning into the podcast, let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm a professional school counselor with the Chicago Public School System. I'm also a certified life coach, and I am a published author. I have 2 books that are already out. I have my first book, which is Stepping Into Me, and I also have my book, My Motivational Workbook, which goes hand in hand with my life coaching. I also have a new book that's coming out pretty soon, very soon. It's a children's book, and I'm so excited about this. It's called The ABCs of Me. I'm excited about that. So if you have not purchased any of my books, guess what? This is your opportunity to do so. Visit my website. They're on the website, and I'll make sure that I send those out as soon as possible. They're also on Amazon. So if you can go to Amazon, you can see my books right there, Stepping Into Me and My Motivational Workbook. Me, Latoya Dameron, I believe in connection and cultivation. I believe in relationships. I believe in sharpening your character traits so you can be a contributing, fully functioning person in our society. I'm a mother of 3. I have 3 children, my Malachi, my Deja, and my Zoe. I'm a sister, an aunt, a cousin, a friend. And guess what, you guys? I am a wife. I am married to my soulmate of 16 years. We've been together over 21 years, and I'm so excited and thankful for him. God designed him just for me. Let me leave you with some of my contact information. So if you have not done so already, make sure that you share my page. Make sure that you tell your family and friends about it. Follow me on social media at L Dameron Enterprises. That's my Facebook and my Instagram name. Please make sure that you do so. Like, share, comment. Also, I have to say thank you to my following sponsors. I thank you to my uncle. His name is Keith Ward. You can find him at keith-ward.com. You can follow him on Instagram as well as Facebook. Also, a huge shout out to City Point Lofts and Church. Shout out to Pastor Demetrius. And if you have not done so yet, make sure that you download the Black Podcast app. You can find so many motivational people on there, so many ways and things for you to connect with your culture. And you can do so on the Black Podcast app. So follow them. Also follow them on Instagram. So let's jump right into it. Today's topic is, what does it mean to live with guilt? And I came up with this topic before we dive into our lesson and talk about the meaning and things like that. I listened to Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts. Maybe you've heard of her, maybe not. And she's talked about living with guilt and how she was had teenage pregnancy and the shame that was brought on by that, being the daughter of someone as large as Pastor T.D. Jakes or Bishop T.D. Jakes, and how she had to live with guilt and how she wanted to be shamed, but she had to break out of that. And not only was she able to break free from that, but she was able to positively impact the lives of so many others, which gave me this topic. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Guilt. It's an incredibly powerful emotion. The feeling of guilt is unique from feeling sad or upset. Guilt often combines feelings of shame, anxiety, frustration, and humiliation all in one. These emotions can well up inside of you, and they can build over time. Most especially if you never admit to yourselves that you were at fault about something. Guilt can majorly affect our sense of self-worth, and it affects our self-esteem as well. Guilt can be hard to predict. Some feel it stronger than others. Feelings of guilt are quite common among those with mental disorders, right? Or people who suffer from anxiety. It's most common with people who show and experience depression and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Guilt is important because it plays a role in regulating our moral behavior, those things that we value, those things that we hold near and dear to our hearts, our experiences. And it can help us correct our mistakes and prevent future wrongdoing. So of course, people know that guilt feels unpleasant and is sometimes associated with feelings of tension and regret. So what does living with guilt really mean? Regardless of where that guilt comes from, the stress of the guilt itself can have a serious effect on some people. While mostly psychological, some physical effects happen as well, like insomnia, loss of appetite, and feeling of dreariness or depression. Guilt happens to share a lot of those same symptoms as that of depression. And depression can be developed within someone who suffers from severe guilt issues. This is why it's so incredibly important for people that are having these issues with guilt that you seek help. So, you probably are wondering, how can I recognize if I'm living with it or not? There are so many things. So I'm gonna tell you some signs of guilt. One, being overly sensitive to the effects of every action, whether it's brought on by yourself or you observed it in someone else, but you're just overly sensitive by the actions of others. Overwhelmed by possibly making the wrong decision, if it's overwhelming you. Low self-esteem is a sign of guilt. Putting others before yourself until it's detrimental is a sign of guilt. And avoiding your range of emotions, so not dealing with how you're feeling in the present moment, that is a sign of guilt. If you can identify with any of those things that I name or any of those signs, then you may possibly be living with guilt. So let's talk about the research, because you know I have to do a little research, right? So some studies have found that guilt may help protect people from emotional distress, which is true, right? It's our moral compass sometimes. Others suggest that guilt, especially excessive guilt, contributes to emotional and mental distress. In general, they talk about 3 different types of guilt. We have reactive guilt, anticipatory guilt, and imperial guilt. So let's talk about the definitions of those. So reactive guilt, it happens when a person believes that they have acted either against their own personal belief of what is morally good or the standards that society has for acceptable behavior. That's reactive guilt. So anticipatory guilt. This guilt is the result of thinking about acting against your personal moral standards or the standards of society. So a person may choose not to take a certain action because they know it is wrong or they believe that it may hurt others. And then we have the imperial guilt. Now this guilt, it can be more complicated, extremely complicated actually. Imperial guilt can be described as a person's feelings for general injustice or the idea that life just isn't fair. It can also describe the guilt as a person who feels for the negative impact that they may have on the lives of other people. Some researchers further divide into 2 more categories, maladaptive guilt as well as adaptive or pro-social guilt. So maladaptive guilt, this kind of guilt often has a negative impact on life. This guilt might include chronic guilt or guilt that relates to shame, what I talked about with Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts, right? And other guilt that leads to mental or emotional distress. Whereas adaptive or pro-social guilt, this kind of guilt is believed to be helpful as it relates to a person's understanding of wrongdoing and responsibility. So let's talk about different contributions to guilt. So we have so many different contributions to why we fall into the pits of living with guilt. It can come from family. So a child generally learns about right or wrong from their family members, right? Especially their parents. So when a child misbehaves, a parent usually expresses that disappointment and issues a consequence because they misbehave. So knowing that their parents are disappointed, it may trigger some feelings of regret, some feelings of guilt. And that child may want to do whatever it takes so they can win back the approval of their parents. Does that make sense? So I love to use analogies like that because I'm a teacher, right? I work in the school system with little babies. So I wanted to use that example as it relates to family and how we can contribute to guilt as it relates to small children. But let's look at that of culture. When a person's culture holds a certain behavior or deem a certain thing wrong, a person may feel guilty even if their own moral code tells them that nothing is wrong with the behavior. So let's talk about it. An unmarried person brought up in a culture that discourages sexual relationships outside of marriage. They may feel guilty when they have sex, even if they believe it's perfectly fine to have sex without being married. A guilt culture emphasizes the effects of a person's behavior on others, and they connect that to how a person is viewed by other people. So when a person's actions cause others harm or distress, that person loses the respect of their society or their culture. So I want to leave you all with some ways to deal with guilt. And this list is not all encompassing. You can definitely, and the goal is for you to definitely research this and not define it for yourself. But let's think about it. Ways that you can deal with guilt. One, name it. Set it out. Put it on the forefront. Explore the source in which that guilt comes from. Apologize and make amends, whether it's to yourself or to someone else. Make sure that you're learning from the past. Remember, our experiences, they shape our character, right? So learn from the past. Don't stay in the past. Make sure that you're practicing gratitude in everything that you're doing and that you do. Replace that negative self-talk with self-compassion, with positive self-talk. I like to say affirmations every single day. They have so many apps for that. Download one. I Am app, plug in it. Make sure that you download it. Remember that guilt can actually work for you in your moral compass. So if you're feeling convicted about something, that's pretty good, right? Because those are your moral values. But you don't ever want to be in a place of condemnation to where you're feeling so guilty that you can't move forward. Lastly, forgive yourself. There's no such thing as a perfect person. If you want to unpack this or any other topic that I talk about on this podcast, please reach out to me. I can be reached at my website, ldameronenterprises.com. You can send me an email, ldameronenterprises@gmail.com. You can leave a comment below. You can ask a question below. You can reach out to me on social media, Facebook or Instagram, Dameron Enterprises. I certainly hope that you learned something, that something has triggered something within you, that you take away something, that you add on something. Share it with me. I welcome it all. This has been my lesson on living with guilt. Join me next time on this podcast as we discuss many other topics such as relationships, what is love, dealing with distractions. And be sure to follow me, like, share, and comment. And if you're looking for a life coach, I'm your girl. Take a look at my website. I have so many different coaching packages. Until next time, I'll see you soon. Be great.